Forward. Love does not always arrive with sweet words, constant messages, or endless affection. Sometimes it hides behind silence. Sometimes it hides behind distance. Forward. Sometimes it even looks like rejection. That is why so many people walk away from someone who truly cared for them, while others stay attached to someone who never did. Forward. The difference is not always easy to see. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that every avoidant who pulls away has stopped loving them. Forward. Psychology tells a far more complicated story. Some of the strongest signs of love from an avoidant are the very behaviors that confuse almost everyone. Forward. They step back when emotions become intense. They become quiet after moments of closeness. They disappear when the relationship feels deeper than before. On the surface, forward, these actions look like emotional coldness. Underneath, something very different may be happening. This is where many relationships begin to fall apart. Forward. One person sees distance and assumes the feelings are gone. The other person feels overwhelmed by emotions they never learned to handle. Forward. Both people believe they understand the situation. Both are often wrong. Forward. That misunderstanding creates painful endings that might have been avoided if they had understood the psychology behind avoidant attachment. Forward. The truth is that avoidants often experience love in ways that are deeply different from what most people expect. Their emotions do not always disappear. Instead, forward, they become tangled with fear, self-protection, and an intense need to regain emotional control. That combination creates behaviors that seem confusing, contradictory, and even hurtful. Forward. Yet those same behaviors can sometimes reveal just how important someone has become in their life. There is a lesser-known fact that surprises many psychologists who study attachment. Forward. Avoidant individuals are not necessarily less emotional than everyone else. In many cases, they experience emotions just as deeply. The difference is how they respond to those emotions. Forward. Instead of moving closer when they feel vulnerable, they often move away. Instead of asking for reassurance, they convince themselves they do not need anyone. Forward. Instead of expressing love openly, they hide behind independence. To someone on the outside, it looks like they do not care. Inside, forward, they may be fighting feelings they never learned how to manage safely. Forward. This pattern usually begins long before adult relationships. Forward. Attachment researchers have found that people with avoidant attachment often grew up in environments where emotional needs were ignored, discouraged, or treated as weakness. Forward. As children, they slowly learned a simple lesson. Depending on other people felt unsafe. Showing vulnerability did not always bring comfort. It sometimes brought disappointment, forward, rejection, or emotional distance. Over time, their minds adapted. They became experts at relying on themselves. Forward. They buried uncomfortable feelings before those feelings could overwhelm them. They built emotional walls that protected them from pain. Those walls worked very well during childhood. Forward. The problem is that the same walls remain active in adult relationships, even when genuine love finally appears. That is why an avoidant can send completely mixed signals. Forward. One day they seem warm and connected. The next day they become distant without warning. They may enjoy spending time with someone, then suddenly cancel plans or become unusually quiet. Forward. Many people interpret this as manipulation or loss of interest. Sometimes that interpretation is correct, but many times, forward, it misses the real psychological process taking place beneath the surface. Emotional closeness activates two powerful systems inside an avoidant at the same time. Forward. One part of them wants connection. Another part fears losing independence, emotional control, or personal safety. These two forces collide forward, creating behaviors that seem irrational to anyone who does not understand attachment psychology forward. Traditional relationship advice often fails because it assumes everyone experiences love in the same way. It teaches that if someone loves you, they will always move closer forward. They will always communicate openly. They will always express their emotions clearly. While those behaviors are healthy goals, avoidant attachment does not always follow that path forward. Fear changes the way love is expressed. Self-protection changes the way affection appears. Vulnerability becomes something dangerous instead of comforting forward. This does not mean every avoidant relationship is healthy. It also does not mean every person who acts distant secretly loves you forward. That is one of the most dangerous myths on the internet today forward. There is an important difference between attachment patterns and unhealthy behavior. Many people excuse disrespect, emotional neglect, dishonesty, or repeated mistreatment by saying they are just avoidant. That is not what psychology teaches. Avoidant attachment explains behavior. It does not excuse harmful choices. Someone who repeatedly lies, manipulates, insults, or ignores your emotional well-being should not receive endless understanding, simply because they struggle with intimacy. Healthy relationships still require respect, accountability, and effort from both people. Understanding attachment helps explain confusing behavior. It should never become permission for emotional harm. That is exactly why this video focuses on consistent patterns rather than isolated moments. One quiet day means very little. One loving message also means very little. Human emotions change constantly. Real attachment reveals itself over time through repeated actions. The strongest signs of genuine love are not dramatic speeches or perfect romantic gestures. They are small behaviors that appear again and again, even when fear is present. Those patterns tell a much more reliable story than temporary emotions. Another surprising fact is that avoidants often reveal their feelings through actions they never intended to communicate. They may remember tiny details about someone months later. They may quietly adjust their routine to make room for that person. They may return after periods of distance because their emotional attachment continues pulling them back. They may protect someone in subtle ways without ever saying the words, "I love you." These behaviors are difficult to fake because they happen naturally. They appear when emotional attachment becomes stronger than the instinct to stay emotionally disconnected. That is why paying attention only to words often leads people in the wrong direction. Some people speak beautifully while investing very little emotionally. Others struggle to express even simple affection while carrying deep emotional attachment inside. Actions reveal patterns that words often hide. The challenge is learning which actions truly matter and which ones are only temporary mixed signals. Once you understand that difference, confusing behavior starts making much more sense. By the end of this video, you will know how to recognize the behaviors that psychologists associate with genuine emotional investment in avoidant individuals. You will learn why pulling away does not always mean losing interest. You will discover why certain quiet actions carry far more meaning than grand romantic promises. Most importantly, you will learn how to separate authentic signs of love from behaviors that simply create false hope. That knowledge can completely change the way you understand avoidant attachment and protect you from making painful assumptions in either direction. Forward. Some of the signs we will discuss are so subtle that most people overlook them completely. Others seem ordinary until you understand the psychology behind them. Together, forward, they reveal a side of avoidant love that rarely receives attention. It is a side built on quiet loyalty, hidden vulnerability, and actions that often speak much louder than words. Forward. Stay with me until the very end, because the final sign is often the clearest indication that an avoidant has allowed someone into the part of themselves they spend most of their life protecting. Forward. Welcome to Avoidant Psychology. If you enjoy learning the hidden patterns behind human behavior, relationships, and attachment, forward, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you never miss our next deep dive into the psychology that shapes the way people love, fear, connect, and pull away. Let us begin. Forward. One of the most misunderstood signs of love from an avoidant is not that they stay close all the time. It is that they keep coming back. Forward. To someone who does not understand attachment psychology, this behavior looks confusing and even unfair. One week, they seem deeply connected. The next week, they become quiet, distant, forward, or difficult to reach. Then, after some time has passed, they return as if an invisible force has pulled them back. Many people assume this is simply a game. Forward. Others believe it proves emotional instability. The truth is often much more complex. In attachment psychology, this pattern is known as the push-pull cycle. Forward. It is one of the strongest clues that an avoidant is struggling with feelings they cannot easily control. It does not always mean love is present. But when genuine affection exists, forward, this cycle becomes much more intense because two powerful emotional systems begin fighting each other at the same time. Forward. Most people believe that love naturally creates comfort. For an avoidant, love can create fear before it creates peace. Forward. This sounds strange until you understand how the avoidant mind has been shaped over many years. Emotional closeness increases vulnerability. Forward. Vulnerability means another person now has the power to disappoint, reject, or hurt them. Even when nothing dangerous is actually happening, forward, their nervous system reacts as if emotional dependence itself is a threat. Researchers who study attachment often describe this as a protective strategy that developed early in life. Forward. Instead of moving toward emotional safety, the avoidant brain automatically searches for emotional distance. This response is usually fast and largely unconscious. Forward. They may not even realize why they suddenly feel uncomfortable after a beautiful conversation or a deeply connected moment. Forward. All they know is that something inside them tells them to step back. This explains why some avoidants become distant immediately after relationships begin feeling serious. Forward. They may reduce communication. They may spend more time alone. They may focus heavily on work, hobbies, or personal goals. Forward. Sometimes they even convince themselves that the relationship is moving too fast or that something is wrong with their partner, even when nothing has actually changed. Forward. Psychologists sometimes refer to these thoughts as deactivating strategies. These mental habits help the avoidant reduce emotional intensity by creating psychological distance. Forward. The surprising part is that these thoughts often appear strongest precisely because the relationship has become meaningful. The closer they feel, forward, the stronger their instinct becomes to protect themselves. Forward. This is where many people make a painful mistake. They assume distance automatically means the avoidant has stopped caring. Forward. That conclusion feels logical because most secure relationships grow closer over time. But avoidant attachment does not always follow that pattern. Forward. Temporary withdrawal is not the same as permanent disinterest. Someone who has truly lost interest usually continues moving away without looking back. Their investment slowly fades. Forward. Their curiosity disappears. They stop finding reasons to reconnect. An avoidant who is emotionally attached often behaves very differently. They create distance, forward, but the emotional bond continues pulling at them beneath the surface. Days or weeks later, they reach out with a simple message. They ask an unexpected question, forward. They comment on something small. They look for a reason to reopen the connection without directly admitting they missed it, forward. One lesser-known fact is that avoidants often process emotions more slowly than other people. During moments of emotional intensity, their first reaction is usually self-protection. Forward. Only after time alone does their mind begin sorting through what they actually feel. While separated, the emotional pressure decreases. Their nervous system becomes calmer. Forward. Once that happens, the attachment they tried to suppress starts becoming noticeable again. They begin remembering conversations. They think about shared experiences, or they wonder how the other person is doing. Ironically, the distance they created to escape emotional intensity gives their genuine feelings room to become clearer. Forward. This delayed emotional processing explains why an avoidant sometimes appears much more affectionate after spending time apart. Forward. Scientists studying attachment have observed another interesting pattern. Avoidants often suppress emotional awareness rather than eliminate emotion itself. Forward. This means feelings remain active beneath conscious awareness, even when they appear calm on the outside. Their behavior may seem detached, forward, but their emotional system continues tracking important relationships in the background, forward. This is why some avoidants remember meaningful details months after they seemed emotionally unavailable. The attachment never disappeared, forward. It was simply buried beneath defensive habits that had become automatic over many years, forward. Repeated reconnection is often one of the strongest indicators that emotional investment still exists. Returning requires effort. It requires overcoming internal resistance. Forward. Every time an avoidant reaches back towards someone who matters, they are pushing against the very defense system that usually tells them to stay emotionally independent. Forward. They may not return with dramatic declarations of love. They may simply ask how life has been. They may share something funny. Forward. They may find a practical excuse to start another conversation. Forward. These small moments often carry much more emotional weight than they appear to on the surface, because they represent movement toward connection despite internal fear. At the same time, forward, it is important not to misunderstand every return as proof of love. This is where many people become trapped in unhealthy relationships. Forward. Not every person who leaves and comes back is emotionally attached. Some return because they feel lonely. Others return because they enjoy attention, validation, or familiarity. Forward. Some use intermittent contact to maintain control without offering genuine commitment. This behavior is often called breadcrumbing. Forward. Breadcrumbing creates hope without providing consistent emotional investment. The pattern repeats over and over, but the relationship never truly moves forward. The difference becomes clearer when you watch actions instead of isolated moments. An avoidant who genuinely cares usually shows gradual progress over time, forward, even if that progress is slow. Their returns become more meaningful. Their trust slowly increases. They begin sharing slightly more of themselves, forward. They make room for the relationship in ways they previously resisted. There is movement, even if it comes in small steps, forward. A person who is only breadcrumbing usually repeats the same cycle endlessly. They disappear without explanation. They return only when it benefits them. They avoid responsibility, forward. They make promises without changing their behavior. Nothing truly develops because emotional investment is missing, forward. This distinction matters because real attachment creates internal conflict. Manipulation does not. An avoidant who loves someone often looks torn between two powerful desires, forward. One desire says, stay safe. The other quietly whispers, go back. That silent battle explains why they leave, why they struggle, and why, forward. Despite every effort to convince themselves otherwise, they often find themselves standing at the same emotional door once again, forward. One of the quietest signs that an avoidant is falling deeply in love is not found in dramatic words or grand romantic gestures. It appears in something much smaller, forward. They begin making space for another person inside a life they have spent years protecting. To most people, this change looks ordinary. It may even seem too small to matter, forward. But for someone with avoidant attachment, it can represent one of the biggest emotional shifts they will ever make. The reason is simple, forward. Independence is not just a preference for many avoidants. It feels like emotional survival. Their private routines, personal time, forward, and carefully controlled lifestyle create a sense of safety. That space allows them to feel calm and in control, forward. Inviting someone into it means lowering defenses that were built over many years. Many people misunderstand this need for independence, forward. They assume avoidants simply enjoy being alone more than everyone else. While that may be true for some, psychology suggests something much deeper, forward. Independence often becomes a shield against emotional pain. During childhood, many avoidant individuals learned that depending on others could lead to disappointment, criticism, forward, rejection, or emotional neglect. Over time, they stopped expecting comfort from close relationships. Instead, they learned to solve problems alone. They became self-reliant, forward. They convinced themselves they needed no one. That belief became part of their identity. It gave them confidence. It also protected them from future emotional wounds. By adulthood, forward, their personal space had become much more than a physical place. It had become an emotional fortress, forward. That is why allowing another person into that fortress carries enormous meaning. It rarely happens all at once. Avoidants usually test emotional safety in very small ways, forward. They may begin inviting someone into ordinary parts of their day. They may share a morning routine they normally keep private, forward. They may ask someone to join them while running simple errands. They may suggest spending a quiet evening together without needing constant entertainment, forward. These moments seem almost insignificant. Yet each one represents a growing willingness to allow another person into the rhythms of their everyday life, forward. For someone who has spent years protecting emotional distance, these simple actions often reveal far more than passionate words ever could, forward. There is an interesting psychological reason behind this behavior. Human routines create a sense of stability. They reduce uncertainty, forward. Avoidants often depend on predictable habits because predictability feels safe. Every routine becomes part of a carefully balanced emotional system, forward. When another person begins fitting naturally into those routines, the avoidant is slowly changing that system forward. They are making room for someone else inside a structure that was originally designed for only one person. This change requires trust forward. It also requires vulnerability because every shared routine creates another opportunity for emotional attachment forward. Researchers who study close relationships have found that healthy long-term bonds are often built through repeated everyday experiences rather than dramatic moments. Shared meals forward. Regular conversations, familiar places, quiet evenings, ordinary habits gradually become emotional anchors forward. This is especially important for avoidants because their feelings often grow through steady experiences instead of emotional intensity forward. While some people fall in love through excitement, avoidants frequently develop stronger attachment through reliability forward. Every positive interaction teaches their nervous system a new lesson. Closeness does not always lead to pain. Dependence does not always end in disappointment forward. Safety can exist inside connection forward. This explains why small invitations often carry hidden emotional weight forward. An avoidant who asks someone to join a simple activity may not realize how meaningful that invitation actually is. To an outside observer, it sounds ordinary. To the avoidant mind forward, it is another step toward lowering long-standing emotional defenses. They may invite someone into their favorite quiet place forward. They may introduce them to a hobby that usually remains private. They may share music that reflects personal emotions they rarely discuss. These choices are rarely random forward. People naturally protect the parts of life that matter most to them. Sharing those parts signals growing emotional trust forward. One lesser-known fact about avoidance is that they often express affection through inclusion rather than verbal reassurance. Some personalities naturally say, "I love you" with ease forward. Avoidants often struggle with direct emotional language because vulnerability still feels unfamiliar. Instead, they communicate attachment through actions forward. They include someone in future plans. They begin checking whether another person is available before making decisions forward. They naturally assume the other person will be part of upcoming experiences. These quiet behavioral changes often reveal feelings that words fail to express forward. Consistency becomes especially important here. Emotional words can be spoken during moments of excitement. Actions repeated over many weeks reveal something much more reliable forward. An avoidant who consistently makes time for someone despite a busy schedule is showing intentional effort. An avoidant who remembers shared routines forward, keeps returning to familiar traditions, or slowly increases time together is demonstrating emotional investment through behavior. These actions require energy forward. They require emotional adjustment. Most importantly, they require overcoming internal resistance that once protected complete independence forward. This gradual change also explains why patience often matters more than intensity. Many people expect love to appear quickly and dramatically. Avoidants rarely develop that way forward. Their emotional system moves carefully. Each positive experience slowly weakens the fear that closeness always leads to pain. Emotional safety does not appear overnight forward. It develops through repeated evidence that the relationship remains stable even during moments of vulnerability. Every respectful conversation, every reliable interaction forward. Every calm disagreement teaches the avoidant nervous system that connection can exist without losing freedom or identity. As this emotional safety grows, forward, another quiet transformation begins. The avoidant no longer guards every personal boundary with the same intensity. They become more flexible. They begin asking for opinions. Forward. They become curious about another person's daily life. They naturally think about shared experiences instead of separate ones. None of this feels dramatic from the outside. Inside, forward. However, it represents a major psychological shift. The protective walls are not disappearing completely. They are becoming doors that open a little wider each time trust is confirmed. Forward. This is why isolated moments should never be used to judge an avoidant's feelings. One romantic evening means very little if it is followed by months of emotional absence. Forward. One thoughtful message does not erase repeated indifference. Real attachment appears through patterns that slowly become stronger over time. Forward. When an avoidant consistently creates more room for someone inside the life they once guarded so carefully, they are revealing something that words often fail to capture. Forward. They are no longer protecting only themselves. They are beginning to protect the connection as well. Forward. And that quiet shift opens the door to another powerful sign that many people completely overlook. Forward. One of the clearest signs that an avoidant has developed deep feelings often goes unnoticed because it does not arrive through emotional speeches or constant reassurance. Instead, forward, it appears in the smallest details. They remember things that most people forget. They remember a story you told months ago. They remember your favorite coffee, forward, the song that makes you emotional, or the date of an event that mattered to you. They remember the way you reacted during a difficult day, forward. They may never mention these memories until the exact moment they become useful. Then suddenly, forward, they bring up a detail that surprises you because you assumed they were not paying attention. In reality, they were paying much closer attention than they ever allowed you to see. Forward. This surprises many people because avoidants often appear emotionally distant on the surface. They speak less about feelings. They avoid long emotional conversations. Forward. They rarely describe everything happening inside their minds. Because of this, others assume they are not emotionally engaged. Psychology suggests something very different. Forward. Many avoidants become careful observers. Instead of expressing emotions openly, they collect information quietly. They watch behavior. They notice patterns. Forward. They remember conversations. Their emotional attention often happens silently rather than verbally. Forward. This quiet observation becomes one of the ways they stay connected while still protecting themselves from feeling too exposed. Forward. Researchers who study attachment have found that people do not all communicate love in the same way. Some express affection through words, others through physical closeness. Forward. Others through practical support. Avoidants often lean toward observation and action because these forms of connection feel safer than direct emotional expression. Forward. Speaking openly about love requires vulnerability. Paying attention does not. This is why an avoidant may struggle to say, "I missed you," forward, while still remembering exactly how you take your tea after months apart. Forward. Their memory becomes a hidden language that reveals emotional investment without forcing them into emotional exposure. Forward. There is another reason this happens. The avoidant mind is often scanning the environment for emotional safety. This habit develops early in life. Forward. Many learned that paying attention to other people helped them predict emotional situations before they became painful. Over time, observation became second nature. Even as adults, forward, They continue noticing small changes in people they care about. They recognize shifts in tone, mood, and routine. They may not always ask about those changes immediately, but they notice them, much more than most people realize. One lesser-known fact is that emotional memory becomes stronger when someone carries personal significance forward. Neuroscientists have found that emotional importance influences how the brain stores information forward. Details connected to meaningful relationships often become easier to recall because they receive greater emotional value forward. This helps explain why an avoidant who rarely appears expressive can suddenly remember something deeply personal from many months earlier forward. The memory remained because the person remained emotionally important, even during periods when outward affection seemed limited forward. This creates an interesting contrast between emotional expression and emotional investment. Many people confuse the two forward. Emotional expression refers to how easily someone communicates feelings. Emotional investment refers to how deeply someone values the relationship forward. These two qualities are not always equal. A person may speak beautifully about love while showing little commitment through actions forward. Another person may struggle to express affection verbally while quietly investing enormous emotional energy into the relationship. Avoidants often fall closer to the second pattern forward. Their words may appear restrained. Their behavior often tells a much richer story forward. That story becomes visible through quiet acts of care. They notice when you are tired before you say anything. They remember an important meeting and ask about it later forward. They save something they know you enjoy. They send information related to a hobby you once mentioned forward. They remind you about something important because they remembered even when you forgot. None of these actions appear dramatic. They are easy to overlook because they feel ordinary forward. Yet these behaviors require attention, memory, and emotional consideration. They show that someone has continued thinking about you even when you were not physically present forward. An avoidant who genuinely loves someone often communicates through practical care rather than emotional performance. They may fix a problem without being asked forward. They may quietly help reduce your stress. They may protect your privacy or defend your reputation when you are not around forward. These actions rarely attract attention because they happen without announcement. They simply become part of the relationship forward. Many avoidants feel more comfortable showing love than explaining it. Actions create less emotional exposure than heartfelt conversations. For them, forward, doing something meaningful often feels safer than saying something deeply emotional. As trust grows, these quiet expressions usually become more frequent forward. This does not mean the avoidant suddenly transforms into an openly emotional person. Their personality often remains relatively reserved forward. The difference is that they become increasingly comfortable allowing their attention to become visible. They begin asking follow-up questions about previous conversations forward. They remember family members by name. They recall personal goals and check on your progress. They connect present conversations to things you shared long ago forward. These small moments reveal that your life has become part of their internal world forward. This gradual change reflects something important happening beneath the surface. Trust is replacing emotional self-protection forward. The avoidant no longer feels the same need to keep every feeling hidden. Instead of distancing themselves from emotional attachment forward, they begin allowing that attachment to shape their daily behavior. They think about your happiness before making certain decisions. They anticipate your needs without being reminded. Forward. They naturally carry pieces of your life in their own memory because your well-being has become emotionally relevant to them. It is important, however, forward, to watch for consistency rather than isolated gestures. Anyone can remember a birthday or a favorite color once. Forward. Genuine emotional investment appears through repeated attention over time. The avoidant continues noticing the details because the relationship continues holding emotional value. Forward. Their memory reflects ongoing care rather than occasional effort. The little things never stop mattering because the person never stops mattering. Forward. This is often the hidden language of avoidant love. It speaks softly. It avoids dramatic promises. It rarely demands recognition. Forward. Yet beneath every remembered detail is an important psychological truth. Attention follows emotional significance. People naturally remember what their hearts continue returning to. Forward. Even when their mouths remain almost completely silent. As that emotional significance becomes stronger, another remarkable change slowly begins to appear. Forward. And it often reveals a level of vulnerability that an avoidant once believed they would never allow anyone to see. For an avoidant, forward, one of the greatest signs of love is not saying the perfect words. It is allowing another person to see the parts of themselves they have spent years trying to hide. Forward. This change rarely happens in a dramatic moment. It happens quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. At first, it may seem like nothing has changed. Forward. Then one day, they admit they had a difficult week. Another day, they share a memory they normally keep locked away. Later, forward, they confess they were anxious about something that mattered to them. These moments may seem ordinary to someone with a secure attachment style. For an avoidant, forward, they represent something much bigger. They are lowering emotional defenses that were built to protect them from pain long before the relationship even began. Forward. To understand why this matters, it helps to understand how avoidants often view vulnerability. Many people see vulnerability as the foundation of closeness. Forward. Avoidants frequently experience it as a source of danger. Deep emotional openness creates uncertainty. It means another person now has access to fears, disappointments, forward, and insecurities that were carefully hidden. Forward. That level of exposure feels risky because many avoidants learned early in life that expressing emotional needs did not always bring comfort. In some families, forward, vulnerability was ignored. In others, it was criticized or dismissed. Some children learned that showing sadness made no difference. Forward. Others discovered that asking for reassurance only led to disappointment. Over time, they adapted. They stopped expecting emotional support. Forward. They taught themselves to stay strong by depending only on themselves. That survival strategy often follows them into adulthood. Even when they genuinely love someone, forward, their first instinct is still to protect themselves. They solve problems alone. They carry stress silently. They convince themselves that asking for help is a sign of weakness. Forward. From the outside, this can look like confidence or emotional independence. Inside, however, many avoidants are carrying fears they simply do not know how to share. Forward. This is why vulnerability feels so threatening. It requires them to abandon the very strategy that helped them survive emotionally for years. Forward. Psychologists often describe vulnerability as the willingness to risk emotional uncertainty. That definition is especially important for avoidance. Forward. Every honest confession creates uncertainty. Every emotional disclosure creates the possibility of rejection. Forward. Even admitting something as simple as feeling lonely can trigger discomfort because it reveals an emotional need. For someone who has spent years denying those needs, this feels deeply unfamiliar. Their nervous system may react with anxiety long before their logical mind has time to process what is happening. This is why the smallest emotional disclosures often carry enormous meaning. They may tell you they were nervous before an important meeting. They may admit they felt hurt by something another person said. They may reveal that they struggled to sleep because they were under pressure. These statements sound simple, yet they represent moments where the avoidant chose honesty instead of emotional protection. They trusted someone enough to reveal an experience they could have easily kept hidden. One lesser-known fact is that vulnerability often appears in indirect ways before it becomes direct. Instead of saying, "I am afraid of losing you," an avoidant may ask whether you are still upset after a disagreement. Instead of saying, "I need support," they may simply stay close during a difficult day without explaining why. Instead of openly discussing painful emotions, they may tell a story from childhood that quietly explains who they became. These indirect expressions are often easier because they reduce the feeling of emotional exposure while still allowing connection to grow. As trust increases, another powerful shift begins to appear. The avoidant starts asking for help. This may sound like a small step, but psychologically it is one of the strongest indicators that emotional safety has developed. People who believe they must handle everything alone rarely ask for assistance unless someone has become deeply important to them. Asking for advice, requesting emotional support, admitting confusion, sharing uncertainty. Each of these actions reflects growing trust because they require acknowledging that another person matters enough to be included in moments of weakness. Researchers studying healthy relationships often point to mutual dependence as a sign of emotional security. This does not mean losing independence. It means recognizing that healthy relationships allow people to support one another without feeling controlled. Avoidants frequently struggle with this balance. Their fear tells them that dependence equals losing freedom. Their growing trust slowly teaches them something different. It teaches them that accepting support does not erase personal strength. It strengthens the relationship instead. This transformation rarely follows a straight line. An avoidant may open up one week and become quieter the next. After sharing something deeply personal, they sometimes feel exposed. That feeling can activate old protective habits. They may temporarily pull back to regain emotional balance. This does not always mean they regret opening up. Often it means they are adjusting to an experience that still feels unfamiliar. Vulnerability stretches emotional comfort little by little. Each honest conversation makes the next one slightly easier, even if the progress appears slow. Patience becomes important during this stage because emotional openness develops through repeated experiences of safety. Every time the avoidant shares something personal without being judged, mocked, or rejected, their brain receives new evidence. It begins rewriting old expectations. The belief that vulnerability always leads to pain slowly loses its power. A different belief begins taking its place. Some people are safe. Some relationships remain stable even after difficult emotions are shared. This gradual learning process creates the foundation for deeper intimacy. Eventually, forward. The changes become impossible to ignore. The avoidant no longer hides every difficult feeling behind silence. They begin talking about future worries. Forward. They admit personal mistakes without becoming immediately defensive. They reveal hopes they once kept private. They become willing to discuss emotions instead of escaping from them. Forward. None of these changes happen because they suddenly become a different person. Forward. They happen because one relationship has become emotionally valuable enough to challenge years of protective habits. Forward. This is one of the clearest signs of genuine love because vulnerability cannot be forced. It grows only where trust feels stronger than fear. Forward. Every personal truth they reveal represents another piece of themselves, placed gently into someone else's hands. For an avoidant, forward, that quiet act often says more than the most passionate declaration of love ever could. And once that level of trust begins to take root, forward, another remarkable transformation starts unfolding. One that changes the way they think about the relationship itself and the future they once believed belonged only to them. Forward. Perhaps the most powerful sign that an avoidant truly loves you is one that many people miss completely. It is not a dramatic confession. It is not constant affection. Forward. It is not an emotional speech filled with promises. It is a quiet change in the way they think. For a long time, their decisions revolve around one person. Themselves, their schedule, forward, their comfort, their personal space, their emotional safety. Then, almost without realizing it, another person begins appearing in those decisions. They stop thinking only about me. Forward. They slowly begin thinking about us. Forward. This shift is one of the deepest forms of emotional commitment because it reflects a change happening inside the way their mind processes relationships. Forward. To understand why this matters so much, it helps to remember how avoidant attachment develops. Forward. Most avoidants spend years believing that depending on other people creates unnecessary risk. They become experts at solving problems alone. They plan their lives around self-reliance. Forward. Their independence gives them a sense of control. They decide where they go, how they spend their time, and how they handle challenges without expecting help from anyone else. Forward. This pattern is not selfish in the traditional sense. It is protective. Their mind has learned that relying on themselves feels safer than relying on another person. Because of this, forward, relationships often begin with clear emotional boundaries. The avoidant protects personal routines. They guard private time. Forward. They maintain emotional distance whenever closeness begins feeling too intense. Many people see these habits as proof that the avoidant does not care enough. In reality, forward, these behaviors often reflect years of emotional conditioning rather than a lack of affection. Their nervous system has learned to prioritize self-protection above emotional dependence. Forward. Breaking that habit requires much more than attraction. It requires deep trust. Forward. As love grows, something remarkable begins to happen. The avoidant starts making decisions that naturally include another person. This change rarely feels forced. Forward. It develops quietly through repeated emotional experiences. They begin asking themselves whether a certain plan works for both people instead of only for themselves. Forward. They check your schedule before making arrangements. They remember your responsibilities when planning weekends. Forward. They start thinking about how certain choices might affect your feelings. These moments appear ordinary, but psychologically they reveal a profound transformation. Forward. Another person's emotional well-being has become part of their internal decision-making process. Forward. Researchers who study long-term relationships often describe successful partnerships as systems of shared thinking. Forward. Partners naturally begin considering each other's needs because the relationship becomes part of their identity. Forward. This process is especially meaningful for avoidants because it challenges one of their oldest survival strategies. Instead of protecting only themselves, forward, they begin protecting the relationship. They discover that caring about another person's experience does not weaken their independence. Instead, it strengthens emotional security. Forward. One lesser-known fact is that avoidants often show commitment through planning long before they speak openly about their feelings. They may casually mention a future trip months away. Forward. They may talk about events that are still far in the future and naturally include you in those conversations. They may save money for something both of you can enjoy later. Forward. They may discuss future holidays, future projects, or future goals without realizing how much these conversations reveal. For many avoidants, forward, future planning feels safer than emotional declarations because it allows them to express commitment through practical action rather than vulnerable words. Forward. Pay close attention to the language they begin using. Early in the relationship, they often speak from an individual perspective. They say things like, "I will do this," or forward, "My plans are." As emotional attachment grows, those words slowly change. They begin saying, "We should try that. We could go there. Maybe we can plan something next month." Forward. These simple changes in language reflect an important psychological shift. The relationship has become part of the future they are quietly building inside their mind. Forward. Another powerful sign appears in the way they handle disagreements. Avoidants usually dislike emotional conflict because it threatens their sense of stability. Forward. Their first instinct may be to withdraw or create distance. As love deepens, however, they begin showing greater willingness to stay engaged. Forward. They may still need time to process emotions, but they become more interested in finding solutions instead of simply escaping discomfort. Forward. They begin asking how both people can move forward rather than focusing only on protecting themselves. Forward. This willingness to work through challenges reflects growing emotional maturity and increasing trust. Compromise also begins looking different. Forward. Many people misunderstand compromise as giving up independence. Healthy compromise is something entirely different. Forward. It means adjusting personal preferences because the relationship matters. An avoidant who once insisted on complete control over every plan may suddenly become flexible. Forward. They become willing to visit places that matter to you. They adjust routines to spend more time together. Forward. They make room for your needs without feeling that their own identity is disappearing. This balance is important because genuine emotional growth does not erase healthy independence. Forward. It teaches people how to remain independent while also becoming emotionally available. Forward. Psychologists often explain that secure relationships are built through mutual responsiveness. Forward. This means both people gradually become aware of each other's emotional experiences and respond with care. For avoidance, forward, learning this skill often takes longer because their attention has been focused inward for so many years. As trust develops, their awareness expands. Forward. They begin noticing when you are overwhelmed. They check whether you arrived home safely. They remember important events before you remind them. Forward. They naturally offer support because your emotional state has become personally meaningful to them. This transformation is rarely dramatic. Forward. There is usually no single moment where everything changes. Instead, dozens of small decisions slowly reshape the relationship. One thoughtful adjustment becomes another. Forward. One shared plan becomes many. One act of compromise becomes a new habit. Looking back, the difference becomes obvious. Forward. The person who once protected every part of their life from emotional closeness is now quietly building a shared future, one small choice at a time. Forward. That is why this sign often carries more weight than passionate words. Words can appear during moments of excitement. Shared thinking develops only through genuine emotional attachment. Forward. When an avoidant naturally begins asking not only, what is best for me, but also, what is best for us, it reveals that love has moved beyond attraction. Forward. It has become part of the way they see the world, the way they make decisions, and the way they envision the road ahead. Forward. Love from an avoidant rarely looks like the stories most people grow up believing. It is not always loud. It is not always obvious. Forward. It does not always arrive through perfect words or constant reassurance. More often, it appears through quiet actions that slowly become impossible to ignore. Forward. They come back after creating distance because the emotional bond never truly disappeared. They make space for you inside a life they once guarded so carefully. Forward. They remember the smallest details because your life has become important to theirs. They begin lowering emotional walls that once seemed impossible to cross. And forward. Without even realizing it at first, they start thinking about us instead of only me. Forward. The most important lesson is this. Never judge an avoidant by one emotional moment alone. One warm conversation does not prove lasting love. Forward. One period of distance does not always prove the absence of it either. Real answers appear through consistent patterns. Trust grows over time. Vulnerability grows over time. Forward. Emotional safety grows over time. The strongest relationships are built through repeated actions that quietly move in the same direction, even when progress feels slow. Forward. At the same time, understanding avoidant attachment should never become an excuse for accepting repeated disrespect, emotional neglect, dishonesty, or manipulation. Forward. Healthy love still requires effort from both people. It requires accountability. It requires kindness. It requires mutual respect. Attachment behavior, forward, but it does not remove personal responsibility. The healthiest relationships are those where both people continue growing instead of remaining trapped inside old fears. Forward. Perhaps that is the greatest truth of all. An avoidant who truly loves you is not someone who never feels afraid. Forward. It is someone who keeps choosing connection even while fear is still present. Every step toward trust, every act of vulnerability, forward. Every quiet effort to stay emotionally close tells a story that words often fail to tell. Their actions begin speaking a language that fear can no longer silence. Forward. If this video helped you understand avoidant psychology in a new way, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more deep insights into human behavior and relationships. Forward. I would also love to hear your thoughts. Which sign surprised you the most, and which one have you personally experienced? Share your answer in the comments. Forward. Sometimes the smallest action reveals the deepest feeling, and the quietest form of love is often the one that changes a life forever.